Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Forum. I'm so glad you're here. Everyone who joins us is on the spiritual journey in your own way, and I just bless your journey. I'm so glad you're with us. As you know, this is a podcast of hope and inspiration and awakening, and every guest I have on is some representation of hope, awakening, and opening our hearts and also inspiration. So I just want to give a shout out to the retreat that I have coming up in October. We'll be talking about that later because my guest today is the keynote speaker there. The retreat, you can find out more at thespiritualforum.org/retreat. And you can find out more about everything about the podcast at thespiritualforum.org. Don't forget to leave a positive rating and review. And if you feel moved, always appreciate donations. It's the only way that my business keeps going on, as well as Renee's. And she's my guest today. Let me introduce her. Today, my guest is Renee King-Sonnen. She was born and raised in Houston, Texas, and she's the founder of Rowdy Girl Sanctuary. A former singer-songwriter, top-producing realtor, and spa owner, Renee was a quintessential city girl before moving in with her husband, Tommy, into their Angleton, Texas ranch in 2009. She fell in love with all the farm animals on the ranch, and after repeatedly witnessing the ranch's baby calves going to the sale barn, she became more and more depressed about the inherent cruelty that she saw in the ranching business. By October 2014, she decided she no longer wanted any part in ranching, and she went vegan, pursued her dream to open a sanctuary for farm animals. Renee and Tommy's story has been seen on CBS, ABC, RFD, and Animal Planet. Their sanctuary lives are featured in the newly released documentary, Rowdy Girl. She's going to be the keynote speaker at the upcoming Whole Planet Spirituality Forum and Retreat that I'm hosting at Unity Village. And there's so much more to learn about Renee. Welcome, Renee.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol. It's such an honor to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here today, and I'm happy that you're going to be the keynote speaker. I've seen your movie. It's extremely inspiring, and it's also just, I don't know, the day in the life of the ranchers, the farm sanctuary people. It's like it's very calming, but it's also very inspiring, and I just really recommend the film to anyone, and I think we'll probably end up showing it at the retreat. I was kind of wanting to show
Oh,
segments, but once I saw the whole thing, I'm thinking we should probably watch it. So
it's not
anyway, I
that
want to
long,
open
really.
by no, I know it's not that long. That's what I love about it. I mean, I love a lot about it, but it's not like a 2.5 hour movie, so it's very easy to kind of fit into all the social stuff we have going on at the retreat. I want to remind the listeners that before you get into your story, the spiritual path is about awakening. It's about opening your heart. It's about aligning your feelings with your thoughts and your values and your words and your actions. And all of this is very difficult path. Most of us are kind of off in some way. We have certain feelings, but we behave differently. We have values, but we don't speak them. And my view of Renee is you're a very aligned person and really living the spiritual path. And I'm just real excited to hear about more about your story. Would you like to fill in some of the blanks of the introduction that I gave and tell us about your spiritual path and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, Carol. I'll be happy to do that. Over the course of 65 years that I've been breathing on this planet in this life, I have always been a spiritual seeker ever since I was a little bitty girl. I can remember a poem I wrote when I was a little bitty, and it was all about God, watching over me and the stars and the sea and the fishes. I mean, I can remember this poem as if it was yesterday. And I've always had a belief. I've always had faith. I've always lived from a place of knowing that there was so much more to it than what meets the eye. And so I have, through the years, cultivated a rich inner spiritual life. I've studied uh, many religions. When I say studied, I mean studied. I do not do things lightly, I do not do things on the surface. When it comes to my spiritual path, I go deep. And so I am, uh, I've studied Hinduism, Taoism, Sikhism, Wiccan. I consider myself a devotee of Swami Satchidananda, and I was given the name Sangita by him before his passing. I've also studied, Kundalini yoga, and I've had my own yoga studios. Um, just there's just such a rich inner life when you look around right at my disposal. I mean, it's Jesus and the Essenes, the forbidden mysteries of Enoch. I have my Lost Gospels of the Peace right down there. I am always, always seeking. I never ever arrive. I am constantly seeking and constantly going deeper because I really do believe that as deep as the ocean is, we've never gotten to the depth of it all. And so I believe the same thing about our spirituality, that we can never think we're at the depth. We've always got to be willing to go deeper.
Awesome. That's really, really cool. I have an ordination in interfaith as well as unity, and I found studying all the religions so very, very interesting, and just kind of taking a deep dive, and also the spiritual practices, going to synagogue or going to mosque, going to church, all these different ways that people experience the divine. And you don't really have to be just like that, but to go over cross the road and see what is there, I think it really does enrich our whole faith experience. You also mentioned to
Yes.
me at one point the book, Why Every Christian Should Be Vegan.
It's
I
over
bought
here
that
too.
book.
Yeah, well, every
Yeah.
Christian. You did? Yeah. I have it right here. It's just so there's this one right here, Why Every Christian Should Be Vegan, and the Essene Gospel of the Peace. Uh, I consider myself a very esoteric Christian. I'm not your traditional Christian. I grew up traditional Christian, but and honestly, that is the reason I started going into studying various other religions, is because I became so conflicted about some things that happened in the traditional church. And so I just 100% turned my back on dogma, religion. I never turned my back on Jesus because I always had a real heart for Jesus's work. But I had a real problem with the fact that there was 17 years missing out of the Bible regarding the fullness of his life. And so when I began to take into consideration the fact that this man that I loved and thought was such a great example of who and what we should aspire to as a human, that his life was missing from the Bible, I was like, something's not adding up here. And so I have studied all of that stuff, and so I've been able to come full circle. And now, with all the things that I've studied, I believe that Jesus did the same thing.
Uh-huh. That he was a deep seeker.
I really I believe he was a
Yeah.
deep seeker, and I believe he probably those 17 years of his life that was missing out of the Bible, I believe that he was probably studying in all sorts of other lands, whether it be India, whether it be Thailand, whether it be uh, Kathmandu, who knows where he went. But I believe he went to different places, sought other teachings himself. I believe he was very open minded. I mean, he wasn't a Christian. Christianity, he didn't like call himself a Christian. He was a Jew. And so, I just I love him, and I really seek the truth in those missing years.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I interviewed a couple gentlemen recently about the origin of the Gospels, and they had some really interesting things to say about the historicity versus mythology. And I think a lot is unknown, but we are compelled to go deeper and to learn more. And I think for me, the most important thing is the teachings of love one another, the teachings of forgiveness, and that just expanding your love more and more and more. That's the underlying teaching that I think those of us who are extending our circle beyond the human boundary to animals. I think we're adhering to that in a different way. Not I'm not trying to be like we're better or anything like that, but I do think the commandment, love one another, does extend to all beings. And that's what you're doing with your sanctuary, and it's so beautiful. I'd love to hear more about this transformation you went through from being the rancher's wife to being now the caretaker of the animals. Is there more you'd like to say about what happened in your heart and what that transformation was about?
Sure, because I know there's always people that have not heard our story, and it's such an important uh, foundation of the work I do. Uh, the 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 dark night of the soul for me was it happened around February of 2014. That is when I realized that what we were doing, I could just really no longer do. I was going crazy. I didn't know I was going vegan, but I knew I was going crazy because I was blocking my husband at every turn. And he was having to hide the fact that he was sending the animals to the sale barn from me. So he would try to do it when I wasn't around, but I always knew the signs, I knew the sounds. And so it just really angered me whenever he wouldn't tell me what was going on, but I knew what was going on. And, I began to side with the animals instead of my husband, and I wasn't a vegan. I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he, but we were doing it anyway. It didn't end. It didn't end till I went vegan in October of 14. But around February of 2014, Lucky, Rowdy Girl's firstborn son, jumped out of the trailer and missed the trailer that went to the sow barn and eventually slaughtered. So Rowdy Girl's firstborn son, Lucky, almost broke his leg doing it, but he escaped. And Tommy started calling him broke leg because his leg was really, really inflamed. He could hardly walk on it. And to this day, Lucky, has got a bigger leg, but he walks on it just fine. It's just bigger. Um, but that was the beginning of me witnessing just how much animals they don't want to be separated from their families. They don't want to be loaded up. It was I'd seen it all before for years. It took me 5 years of seeing all this to finally just break when this happened with Lucky. And I gave my husband so much of a hard time from that moment all the way to October. I began to push him. I wanted to know why we didn't eat our own animals, why we didn't, if we were going to do this business, then we should be slaughtering our own animals. And I didn't do it because I was trying to be, you know, mean or anything. I just couldn't understand why we were sending our animals to the sale barn when we could just slaughter them ourselves if we were going to do this. I mean, in my mind at that time, it was like it would have been better if we had a system where we killed them ourselves than separating them and sending them to be killed. It didn't make sense to my brain. And Tommy said, Renee, you need to quit asking questions like this. And I'm like, well, I'm going to keep asking them till you answer, because I don't understand the business we're in, and it's beginning to take a real toll on me. And finally, he told me that he couldn't kill an animal that he knew, and he couldn't do it himself. And then that really angered me more, because it was like I saw him then as a hypocrite, as somebody that was weak. And oh, okay, we can send him to the cell barn, but we can't kill him ourselves. Well, we're going to change that. And so then I began to challenge him. I didn't realize me challenging him was going to take us to the brink of divorce and me starting Rowdy Girl, but there was that constant challenge, the constant next step that I did from February to October that caused the shift. And so when I told him that we were going to kill our own animals from now on, pick one. I said, pick one. Which one would it be? This was a few months after the incident with Lucky, and he picked Lucky. He said, well, if I have to pick one, I'd pick Lucky. And I said, why? He said, well, you know, he's got a bad leg. He's probably not going to be able to hold up any weight on it. He's probably going to have lots of problems. So let's pick the weak link. It's Lucky. I said, okay. So then it's going to be Lucky, huh? And so anyway, that never happened. What happened instead was more and more fights. I started watching slaughterhouse videos. Because Tommy told me that, I didn't even know what veganism was at that point. Even though I had been vegetarian in the past, and I had followed a raw plant-based diet in the past for health reasons at a spa, and I actually for like a long extended period, and I practiced vegetarianism because of my yoga studies. I didn't do it for ethics per se. I did it to study. It was an intellectual pursuit. Uh, but when I started having these emotions for the animals, I started, and I always had emotions for cats and dogs and ferrets and raccoons, but I was having emotions for cows, and it was like not making sense to me. And Tommy was like, Renee, you need to stop watching all those videos. That is just PETA propaganda, he told me. And I was like, oh, really? And so I started diving into PETA propaganda, vegan, blah, blah. I started diving into all this, and I got a wealth of information. And next thing you know, I am crying every single day at my computer for a couple of months, and Tommy was having to live with me crying. I mean, literally bawling my eyes out for everything I was seeing. I was making his life more and more complicated, um, until in October, I I stumbled upon the Melanie Joy video on carnism, and we were going to his mother's house for a Halloween get together with all the kids, like we did every year. There was always a little block party, and we went every year. And so when I stumbled upon this video, it was that day. It was Halloween 2014, and at once I was mesmerized because it was very good storytelling, and she was talking about this family all sitting around a table enjoying beef stew, and somebody wanted to know what the recipe was. And the lady said, well, you start off with a pound of very young golden retriever. And I had watched all these slaughterhouse videos for months. And all of a sudden, in my mind, I was eating a puppy now, and a chopped up dead baby puppy. And the people on the screen were just as shocked as I was. And I felt like I was right there. And then the lady said, oh, no, just kidding. It's really a cow. And I was like, what? And nobody could continue eating because the image of the puppy, that cognitive dissonance had been broken for a moment, and they couldn't resume their meal. Like, oh my God, I could be eating a puppy, a chopped up puppy. And I was just like mortified that this happened. And at that moment, Tommy came in and said, Renee, it's time to go. We got to go and pull yourself together. And so I pulled myself together, put on my makeup, blah, blah, went to his mother's house. like 30 minutes down the road, I'm still kind of playing this out in my brain. We walk in, all the kids are in their costume, everybody's talking. His mother-in-law comes out of the kitchen with a big pot of beef stew. I, divine timing could not have, divine intervention could not have played this any better, because my heart started beating, my ears started ringing. And I was like, she was like, brought out this pot, and I knew it was beef stew. And I just said, I can't eat that. I could smell it. I said, I can't eat that. And she said, well, why? I said, because it's got floating dead, hacked up animal bodies in it, and I can't eat that. And everybody in the room, including the children, stopped talking. They looked at me as if I had said a ton of cuss words to his mother-in-law, his mother. They looked at me like I had cussed his mother out. And I just went, well, and my mother-in-law was like, oh, what did you say? So I repeated myself. And then everybody was like, ooh. And my husband was like, Renee. And I was like, well, it is. And I can't eat that. And and my mother-in-law said, well, Renee, can't you pick it out? And I said, nope, there is no more picking it out for me. That is the moment I went vegan. I had no intentions of going vegan. It was, it just happened as, it's just like that. And my husband's life was a living hell from that moment forward.
Okay. All right. So it was living hell because you were vocal with him about your new awakening, or what?
Vocal is an understatement. I was in his face, cussing him out, calling him a murderer. I became, I mean, if ever there was a vegan on a rampage, it was me. And I was so, because I didn't know I was going vegan. I had been reading all this stuff and watching all this stuff. So the idea of it was there. But as a cattle rancher's wife, you don't sit around and ponder, transitioning to go vegan. You don't do that. And so it was just
Right, right.
like, it was just like there on the surface, unconscious. And whenever that happened, and I'd been feeding baby Rowdy Girl. Baby Rowdy Girl was she was like my entrance into the whole world of the cows a few years prior to all that. So I was already a little touched, if you will, because I saw things that I used to not see in the cows. But I wasn't a vegan. I just saw things different, and Rowdy Girl was my conduit to all that. So on this particular day,
You
I
saw we say you saw things, like you saw their heart, you saw their soul. What did you see?
yeah, I mean, Rowdy Girl. This was back in 2009 or 10. Whenever I bought Rowdy Girl as a little baby and started bottle feeding her. See, Tommy wanted me to get more involved with cattle ranching, and I didn't really want anything to do with it at the time. I didn't want anything to do with it at the time. I was into my yoga and my spiritual studies, and the cows were just there. I didn't want anything to do with it. And his biggest mistake was coming home one day saying, there was a baby, there was a couple of babies that needed a mama, and I had never had children. And so it appealed to that nurturing side of me. And I bought these two calves, one of which was Rowdy Girl, and the other was Bobo, who died very, very soon after with a failure to thrive disease. But Rowdy Girl became like
Mm.
my pet dog. She became the reason I wanted to get up in the morning. I began bottle feeding her every day, twice a day, and I would feed her, and spiritually she fed me a line of communication to all the cows. She began to show me who they were individually. So we had a herd of black Angus. They all, for all intents and purposes, looked alike, unless you were giving were giving them a look in such a way where it was heightened. Like, I began to look at them all through heightened awareness through Rowdy Girl. I began to see them individually. I could tell them apart. And Tommy couldn't even tell them apart. Maybe a few of them, but not like I was. I was seeing them all. I could tell each one separate. And I began to name them. And Tommy was like, Renee, you can't keep naming them cows. And I wasn't a vegan. but I began to have this heightened sense of awareness around the cows. And I began building relationships with them. And that is what I figured out later. That is why I didn't want to get involved with the business, is because once I get involved with animals, uh, there's no way that I can be a cattle rancher. Once I get involved with the animals, I can't do what other cattle ranchers do. I spiritually
Mhm.
couldn't do it. And so, as hard as I tried to be that good, loyal rancher's wife persona, I kept being drawn to the other side spiritually. And I believe Rowdy Girl is a conduit for me. I see her as a spiritual giant that is with me no matter whether I'm there with her or like right now. Like I consider that we always have an open channel. She's always giving me
Mm.
information, and I'm always transmitting information to her. We are on a mission together. I do not know where she ends or I begin anymore. That's the way it really, really is, if you want to know the truth about it. And so,
I love
yeah.
that. That's beautiful. I think people think that works with their soulmate or, a sister or brother or relative or friend or whatever. But I love that you have that experience with Rowdy Girl who was a cow. And, why not? I think the only reason we think that that's unusual is because we haven't had the same encounter. Like we haven't allowed ourselves to encounter another animal like that isn't like dog or cat. The animals that we eat, if we encountered them, if we saw them, their soul, and they look back into our souls, it's a whole different experience, and we just don't normally allow ourselves to do that. I want to talk a little bit about because I know it sounds like you were in Tommy's face a lot
Oh,
when you
yeah.
had your conversion moment, and then you're kind of in his face about things. But when I watch your movie, that's not how you are with people. I think you have a very compassionate and compelling way of speaking to people about the animals and veganism that's very inviting, but certainly not in their face. I mean, it's something I certainly want to try to emulate myself, because there's nothing that's violent about it, and there's nothing that's overbearing about it. So can you tell us about how you've kind of made that transition? Or am I seeing you right? That's how I saw you
Oh,
on the
yeah. No,
movie.
you're seeing me right. You're seeing me right. The thing is, Tommy, Tommy was my husband, and he was a cattle
Right.
rancher I was married to, and I had to go toe to toe with him, or he would have sold all the cows and sent them to slaughter. So I couldn't let that happen, and so I had to be extremely aggressive. It wasn't assertive; it was aggressive. I absolutely told him, if you take them cows up the road one more time, I'll buy them all back with your credit card and bring them back home. You will not do that. You will not. I will. I will keep every eye open so you don't do that, because they became my family. They started becoming like my family. So I threatened them because I had to. I don't advise that. I don't recommend that way of, of, of being with the person you love. But Tommy and I wouldn't be married today had I not done that. I think it was a special. Uh, it was a special time in our lives, and it's actually what birthed the Rowdy Girl movement, if you will. It's what it took that. Um, as far as my activism goes, uh, I am very much the kind of person that asks a lot of questions of people. I say to people all the time, we used to kill animals for a living, so I'm not here to judge you, but I have some questions for you, and I want you to consider XYZ. And so I like to look at the way I do activism as a backdoor approach. I like to go into the back door of their consciousness instead of the front door, because anytime you approach somebody head on, you are going to meet with opposition. I don't care who it is. I mean, anytime you just boom right in their face, you're going to meet with opposition. Be ready for it if that's the way you're going to do it. But if you go like nudge them behind the scenes, like behind their consciousness, things begin to be their idea. They begin to think about things on their own instead of them feeling like something's being forced on them in the front door. So that's the way I do it. And one of the things I do a lot is I go into barbecue places like Lockhart, the city closest to us, is the barbecue capital of Texas. And so I will go to all these different barbecue places and I'll walk in with my meat is murder cap and my whatever. And I'll go up to the person working and I will say, "Do y'all have any vegan barbecue?" And I'm very sincere. And they'll look at me and like, vegan barbecue? I'm like, yeah, vegan chicken or, I've even had vegan ribs. Do you have any like vegan pork? And, and they're like, no, we have grass fed. We have, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, can I speak to your manager, please? Sure. So the manager comes. And so I asked them, I say, look, I live here in, the Lockhart area. We have a farm sanctuary, have lots of tours, and I'm looking for a barbecue place that sells vegan barbecue. I really would like to start getting some catering done. We need a good vegan barbecue joint around here. Can y'all accommodate? Oh, well, we've never thought about it. I said, well, I am your reason to think about it. And there.
So what happened?
Well, they said, well, they told me that they would cater. They would do something to cater to us if we ever wanted to, just to let them know, and we would, they would like put something together, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
the thing is, you've got to be creative when you're dealing with people that, like, I was talking to somebody yesterday that came here, and they're like interviewing me for a podcast and wanting to know, how do you talk to cattle ranchers? How do you get them to change? And I'm like, well, number one, unless you are one, you probably ain't going to get them to think anything except that you're freaking crazy. Because
Mhm.
when you're steeped in generations of tradition and culture and familial loyalty, you can't just expect because you go up to them and say, "Hey, don't you think cows deserve to live too?" You can't think that that's going to make them go, "Oh my God, I need to change what I'm doing." They're going to laugh you out of the parking lot. So yeah, it's a it's a real thing. I've been asked to do workshops on this. I haven't yet because role playing would be a good way to do it. A lot of role play. You have to really know how to
Yeah,
do
I
it.
think we did some role playing at the retreat last year, and maybe we'll do some this year. As I remember watching your documentary, there were a couple people that were very memorable to me. That one young rancher who brought the young calf, and he's
Buster.
like he would never hurt this calf. He he really wanted this calf to be rescued and have a life, and for some reason that was the one calf he cared about, and he wouldn't think about that doing that for the others. It was so interesting kind of to watch that. I mean, he was definitely awake to the love he felt to this one, and and that was an opening you had with him and a conversation you had with him, but he was stopped at that place. Like I couldn't extend that to the others, and probably because of the history and the making a living. We're all making a living and all of that, but it was very interesting to watch.
Yeah. In my father's house are many mansions. And so he was in one of those. And in one of those
Mm-hmm.
mansions, he was able to actually consider Buster as a friend. And in that mansion that he was in, I was able to go there with him and I was able to have a conversation where he didn't reject me. But I had to understand that that wasn't all there was to him. I knew that. I knew that wasn't all there was to him. That's why I kept challenging him with the religion. And You know, what that means is we have open dialogue. I could pick up the phone and talk to Sonny anytime. And, last time I talked to him was just a few weeks ago, and he's supposed to come out and visit Buster. And so when he does, I get a chance to talk to him again. See, it's a
Yes.
process. You don't just talk to a rancher, because you're out there doing activism and think you're going to get them to change their mind. It's, you got to have conversations with these people that are deliberate and genuine over
Yeah, I
time.
love that you say you keep the door open or you keep it open. I think the way the world is, it's always been this way, but it feels more heightened now. That there's really it feels like it's more important now that we keep our connections, that we stay connected, even if we have massive differences, even if we don't see eye to eye on like anything, rather than turn our back and refuse to be in the space of that person. That we still find ways to stay connected, keep our heart open. There's always the possibility of a deeper connection. And there's always a possibility that you or the other person will have some sort of aha moment because of that relationship and because of the tension. And I think that's another big part of the spiritual path is to continue to reach out for people and to stay connected, even if their sense of reality is completely opposite to yours.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And because these people can identify with us because we used to be cattle ranchers, I have a very unique opportunity. And if I could figure out how to educate and teach others how to communicate, it would be very um, good for the animals. And I'm happy to do that. I just don't know how to do it at this point, but I'm certainly happy to do it. Like I have a conversations with a cattle rancher couple, an older couple that has two families here, a cow calf pair, Grace and Randy, and Little Bit in Savannah. Those are two cow calf pairs that would have gone to slaughter at this cattle ranch had this woman not heard about our story through her daughter. And she saw our story on CBS Evening News. And so she knew she could call me crying as a cattle rancher's wife and say, "Can you please help me? I don't want to see Grace go to slaughter. And she's got mastitis really, really bad. And she can no longer have, suck. My husband said
Mm.
she's going to be next to go to the cell barn. I've bottle fed her since she was a baby. And I can't stand the thought of her going to slaughter. And she has a little boy that I've named Randy. And can you
Oh,
please help me through sobs, through sobbing, through sobbing? And, we've got Grace and Randy right here. I've met with this couple, Mary and her husband, Ornis. I think his name is Ornis. Um, on several occasions, they come visit. They come bring feed. They have a cattle ranch, and then a few months after Grace and Randy, she calls me again. They donate to us. We have cattle ranchers that donate. They're members, bona fide cattle ranchers. And
wow.
she calls me a few months later, maybe 9 months later, and she said, "Renee, I don't know what to say except I'm in a situation again with Little Bit." She starts telling me all about Little Bit and her prolapsed uterus and how she's next in line to go to slaughter and she can't do it because she just can't do it. Little Bit is special and her baby Savannah and blah 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 blah. And I said, "Well, Mary," I said, "you can't keep doing this. Um, I'm happy to talk to you about this case. But I can't keep taking every animal you fall in love with." I said, "Because let me tell you, every one of them out there are just like them. All the animals out there in the pasture that you aren't talking to me about today are just like a Little Bit in Savannah." And then she starts crying worse. "Please don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that." I said, "Well, if you want me to consider taking Little Bit in Savannah, you're going to have to hear me talk about it." And so I said, "I'm here for you. You can sob on my shoulder. and we will do that together. But you've got to hear this. I can't be your place where you surrender animals just because you're having a spiritual awakening around this special one. They're all special.
Mhm, mhm.
And so I took a little bit in Savannah, and we have a good relationship. We talk a lot. She comes out and visits, always wants to know about him. I send them pictures, you know. But yeah, yeah. And then there's this other cattle rancher, uh, that donated several $1,000s to our end of year campaign to help with our cow barn. A working cattle rancher because he loves the work we're doing.
Nice. Interesting. It's interesting how the mind and the soul and the heart struggle with this, you know? I mean, it's like at least they're all kind of awakening in a certain way, whereas the rest of the world is just going to the grocery store and picking out their meat or their leather or whatever it is in the store and not even, being close enough to be connecting it at all. And that disconnection, I think it's such a disservice to us all. It's like a break in our humanity that we're so disconnected from the animals of the world and that we've decided to view them as commodities, as things. Because I mean, I think that we come alive when we have these experiences like your cattle rancher wife friend, cattle rancher's wife who's having this dilemma with the animals. She's really facing her own soul, which is, telling her to be love. And wow, what a journey. Can we talk also about the work you're doing with the chicken farmers? I think that's so cool that you're helping the chicken farmers transform their business to stay in business, but doing something completely different.
Yeah, sure. The Rancher Advocacy Program was created out of necessity, really. People, just like I talked to you about, is the reason there's RAP. You know, um, when I originally started RAP, it was not because I wanted to help farmers transition their business. It was because I wanted them to transition their hearts. My ultimate
Mm.
motivation for RAP was never to help them transition their business. Uh, it became that because I began to realize after talking to ranchers, families, that well, what are we going to do instead? And what I began to realize that what I did, I used my skills and my talents, my God given acumen for business and fundraising and promotion. I used all that to do what I do at Rowdy Girl, but not every cattle rancher is going to have those particular set of life skills. And so, what are they going to do? And so I began to go deeper into research to see what I could do to help them. And uh, the Barretts became, oh my God, they're like my family, they became a reason for me to appeal to significant funding to get help for them, and I did, and it's not over. We are in process. We're still in process with that farm, and what used to be a full scale chicken operation where they process 100,000 chickens every 52 days is
Oh
now.
my gosh.
Yeah, that's what they used to do. And so it's now, we're creating a model where we can take those 20,000 square foot barns and we're creating mushroom grow rooms in them. So it's a process, but it's all in play.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that did they come to you wanting to change their business? I can't remember the story.
Well, um, they came to me by way of, you probably know Sean Munson. Uh, Sean Munson, Earthlings and Dominion and all. Well, Sean Munson was in contact with them, and they had already gone vegan. recently at that point, and they were having already an awakening. And I was contacted uh, because I'm known for getting the job done. I'm pretty known for that. I'm pretty known for that. So I was contacted. They needed help. They needed hay. Their cows were going to be starving. Um, and so I drove to Arkansas with my friend Ryuji, 9-hour drive as soon as I heard about it. And I did a fundraiser right away and raised, I don't know, somewhere around $20,000 in just a couple of days to get them hay for their cows. So, you know, that's how it started. And from there, we began to talk, and it was a very complicated situation. They were working with some other folks. They didn't want to work with them anymore. And it just kind of came full circle. They got involved with rap, and it's been a very interesting roller coaster for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about so I'm a Unity minister, and Unity is founded by two people, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And in the early years of Unity, they became ethical vegetarians. Not in the beginning, but they were converted by the printer of their magazine business, who was a Seventh Day Adventist, who walked into their house and says, "What is all this dead stuff doing on your table?" kind of like how you spoke to your mother-in-law. And anyway, they ended up converting to ethical vegetarianism. But Charles wrote extensively about how the meat eating business, the slaughterhouses, that kind of business, how it really messes with the soul and the spiritual development of a person. That we're all paying for this. These people are doing it for us, and there's all of this kind of, I mean, he didn't say this, but it's kind of like bad juju. It's like all of this stuff that we're doing, this constant violence that goes against, I think, our human nature, and the dominion. Yeah, it's just it's not good for anyone. It's not good for the people who are doing the slaughtering. It's not good for the people who are paying for it. It's not good for all of that anxiety and oppression that's going into our own bodies. And so he wrote extensively and spoke extensively about the spiritual aspect of this, and that it's our job to not impose this on people to be killers for us, and it's our job to do what we can for world peace, universal love, ethical living, spiritual development. That all of this is aligned with how we are related to animals, and how we use them or how we see them. And so I think that these people, like when I was watching the movie and I saw the big huge chicken farm that I see all the time when I'm driving through the roads in Wisconsin, the cattle farms too. But I just kind of got the impression that they were kind of like, sometimes farmers get stuck in their business. Like, this is my business. This is how I make a living. I kind of wish it was different, but this is kind of what we have to do. And just the burden on the soul, from a spiritual standpoint, my heart goes out. And I just feel like we're
Yeah.
in this opportunity to have this massive awakening, not making people wrong, not forcing people to do anything or not do what they want to do, but to restore ourselves to like our natural nature, which is to love one another. That's the work you're
Mhm.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And, they get to meet themselves. They get to see who they've been. They get to have their own awakening as they change. And I envision that the Barretts will one day be powerful activists themselves. It's just they've got a lot to get through right now, and we're doing it. We're getting through it. It's just a lot.
Hmm.
They've got to be boots on the ground with what they're doing, and then because the other piece of this is, no matter how much we change our eating habits, until we change governments, until we get new systems in place where, all the money doesn't go upstream to all the good old boys. It's
Right.
it's got a it's like a balance like this until that's why I'm involved with the Agriculture Fairness Alliance. I'm on their board of directors. I was at, in the halls of Congress a few weeks ago talking to 7 different senators' office. I'll be there again in May with our founder of AFA, Connie Spence. We're trying everything we can to get language in the farm bill to help farmers, that are wanting to transition, so that at
Hmm.
least there's some way to give them money. I mean, as it is now, if you want to transition, there's no funding except for private resources like what I've gotten. You can't just rely on private funding. Our government has to see the need here. And that's one of my big goals as well, and so it's quite challenging.
Yeah, you're working all levels. I love the action. I love how you're in action in all these different ways. You're right down there with the animals in the farm, and you're working with the farmers and the ranchers, and you're going into the barbecue store, and then you're working with senators. You're working with all of it. Most of us don't even want to take on one of those. It's pretty amazing. I want to pivot just a little bit because I want to talk about your spiritual practices. And I know you
Yeah.
talked about the different religious traditions that you've dived into. But when I see you on these shows or in your movie, to me, your spiritual practice, or at least one of them, looks like you're going out and sitting amongst the cows and being with them, and that is that a spiritual practice for you?
Oh yeah. I have to just go be in the herd. Like, I consider myself to be one of them, and they have accepted me as a part of the herd, and so I get so much peace. I get grounded. I get insight. I understand who we really are on this planet all together when I'm with them, and my heart is wide open, and I cry a lot, um, because they can take it. You know, they can take
Mm.
all of my sadness, and because I can't live in this world and do the work I do crying. But when I'm with them, I can cry. I can have my grief. They take it. They chew their cud. They are aware of my feelings. They know just exactly what I'm up to. I really do believe I am called by Rowdy Girl herself and the herd around me to do this work. I don't think that it's, me making this decision on my own. I really believe I'm called, and that whatever force is working in this world is working through my cows to me directly. And Rowdy Girl's the leader. So yeah, I get a lot of my meditative juju from them, and sitting right here in my room. And like, if you like what I'm looking at right now, as well as you, is I have a wall that's full of all things spiritual, so that when I'm doing my work, I'm constantly reminded of all the spiritual imagery that I need to stay fully functioning on the inside, to be able to make trips around the world, to make trips to Congress, because that's just me showing up, doing God, that's the least I can do is show up, right? But it takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of organizing, a lot of money. We rely heavily on our membership. I'm always trying to grow membership here, and and on major donors. We rely heavily on people, because I can't. I'm 65 now, and as we move into the next phases of our lives, Tommy and I, we will be traveling globally to promote the film and my book. And we have plans to do an impact campaign around both, to really go deep into the heart of rural America and Christian conservatives, because the Christian conservatives are the ones that need us the most. They're the ones that people in our movement are most afraid of approaching, or think that they can't approach them. And quite frankly, I have no trouble with it at all.
Yes, I love that. Um, and I think that book, I bought that book, Why Every Christian is it Why Every Christian Should Go Vegan or Why Every Christian Should Become a Vegan, whatever it is. He goes, I've got to find that author. I want to get him on my podcast because he goes through all of the scriptures that every Christian points to when it says, "For this is why I eat meat," the fish or Jesus or the lamb, everything over and over. It's like, okay, here's the scripture, here's the interpretation, here's the reality, and he points it out. Every single one there's another interpretation there that says, no, that's not what it is. It's not saying, yeah, go ahead and eat whatever you want or kill whatever you want at all. And can you imagine? I mean, we view God, the creator or the creative force, as love. We view God as, at least I do, divine wisdom, divine love, understanding, and that we know that love is imparted to all of creation. So why would it ever be okay if one part just completely annihilates another part? I mean, why would God go, yeah, do whatever the heck you want with those over there? I love them, but I love you more. It's like, no, that's just not what's in the Bible.
No, man, just from historically has needed to create a way to be powerful, to dominate. It's all about supremacy, and it is just everywhere in the Bible that is what it's obvious that it was translated and created to dominate people. And so there's so much left out. And I really do believe that if we listen to our heart instead of dogma, anytime we're spewing dogma, oh, well, I eat animals because God said I could. Uh, that is so, I mean, when we really think about that, it'd be like saying, well, I have slaves because God said I could. I have, I beat my
Yeah,
wife
I
because
bashed my
God said
kid's
I
head
could.
in because God said it was okay. you know, yeah, it's
I
not
mean,
it's not taking
there's
that deeper
so
dive, which you talked about in the beginning. Questioning everything. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you have,
Yeah, there's
yeah,
so I think that's wonderful that you're going into that. That's a great place for you to go into the Christian community and bring the voice there. So
we're hoping to
kudos to
take it
you.
into cowboy church.
Okay,
Have you
great.
ever heard of a cowboy church?
I have not heard of a cowboy church, but I've got an image of it once you mentioned it.
Well, there's a whole fellowship and an association of cowboy churches, and they
Okay.
are good old boys that wear their leather boots and their hats, and their jeans. They go to church. They are usually farmers and ranchers, or somehow connected to, not really have to, but they usually have a little arena that they do little rodeos.
Okay. All
And
right.
so, yeah, that's where I want to go.
Interesting. Uh, I had the whole picture, but I didn't have the rodeo. Hmm. Okay. Okay. We're coming up on our hour, and I just want to make sure if you have anything else that you want to say, that you can do that in the next couple minutes. What else would you like to share?
Well, number one, I want to just tell you, I have been to Unity many, many times. I've also got like 3 or 4 of the books over there by Unity that I've read through the years, and so I love the Unity philosophy, if you will. I just love it, and so I did want to tell you that, and just for your listeners to be on the lookout for a book that will be coming out. It's a secret right now. I can't tell you the title, but it will tell everything you ever wanted to know. I mean, maybe I'll have a sequel, I'm sure, but uh, it's full of secrets about what it means to be a cattle rancher's wife. So that book's going to be coming out. Looks like probably in October. Uh, yeah, just if you are looking for a way to get involved, to just become a member, that is one of the very, very best things you can do. Join the Rowdy Club.
Great. We'll have your links on the podcast page, and maybe when your book comes out, we'll have you back on. That would be kind of fun to talk through that. Yeah. And you'll
And
be
going
the
to Toronto.
keynote at the What's that?
I said we're going to Toronto April 28th, and we'll be there through May 7th. I could talk about it now. We got chosen to be in a world premiere for Hot Docs, which is the largest North American film festival.
Nice. Okay, great. All good news. All good news. So, whatever links you want for me to put on the podcast page, I'll put them on for you. So, thank you, Renee, so much. I look forward so much to being the keynote at our retreat this October. And I'm so in awe of the work you're doing and how you're so spiritually aligned. Your feelings, your heart, your mind, your body, your soul, and the activism that you're doing and the actions you're taking, the conversations that you're having, and staying connected to so many wonderful people. I just think you're a bright light in the world. And I'm so glad to know you and to have you on the podcast today.